America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Tuesday, February 6th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Katya Schwenk, journalist based in Phoenix, writing for The Lever on the disaster with wings that Boeing is. Meanwhile, speaking of a guy who got stranded on a Boeing flight, Blinken is in the Middle East again, attempting supposedly a ceasefire plan, as Amnesty International accuses Israel of killing Palestinians in the West Bank with total impunity. Meanwhile, Israel claims that more than 1/5 of the hostages in Gaza are now dead, as British TV says documents accusing UNRWA of having employees who participated in October 7th contain no evidence.
Whoa.
Michigan
Shocked.
Democrats pushing a vote for uncommitted in the primary to attempt to protest White House support for the Gaza assault. Meanwhile, Republicans kill the Ukraine funding as they turn on their own draconian immigration so-called compromise bill. House Republicans plan to vote today on the Mayorkas impeachment, assuming they all show up for work. Senate investigation finds suspicious deductions from Clarence Thomas's buddy's Harlan Crow's yacht. The National Labor Relations Board says Dartmouth basketball team can unionize. Presumably other college
Let's
teams
go.
can too. And Smith College student dining workers vote to unionize. Lastly, ex-New York cop funneled illegal funds to Mayor Adams' campaign. Why do all these people keep doing this to him?
You gotta get better friends.
All that and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is, as Emma Vigeland famously says,
Newsday Tuesday.
there you go, Newsday Tuesday. We do have a guest, but it's about the stuff in the news.
Still counts.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff to get to. But let me just read this just because I just saw it. Not Nick Fuentes said, "Hello, Sam. If you're reading this, can you blow the shofar for me? I'm getting married this Friday to my sweetheart. Been a listener since December 2023. I've even called you about the Lady Ballers movie. Became a member last month. Left is best." I mean, this is people call me about the Lady Ballers.
Since December 2023, so 2 months.
Oh, wow,
Not
2 or
Nick
3 months.
Fuentes.
No,
I mean,
exactly.
I'm glad that you've taken to the show and
Yep.
all the
Folks,
Well,
you can
traditions.
join that person by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. It is your support that makes this show possible. I want to get to this story about what's going on in the Michigan primary, because that's happening in what, like 2 weeks, I think, right? The 13th. That's a week from now. But let me just say, like, if you're a billionaire like Harlan Crow.
Let me put myself in the mindset.
Thank you. I honestly, like, I don't understand how you go, like, to your account, like, hey, man, I want to save a couple million on that yacht.
First, you invite him into your garden of dictators.
I just, like,
Yeah.
what? Like, you're a billionaire. Like,
Sam,
you, like,
that's how he got to be a billionaire.
I understand,
Yeah.
but, you know, now that you've arrived, Like, don't you? Why not? Like,
But
just
that's why
sharks.
your mindset,
I
your
know.
cuck mindset, is why you'll never
I
be a
know it.
billionaire.
But it's like you're sitting there going, like, do I travel to Mars? Like, how am I going to spend all this money? Well, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to spend it on taxes on my yacht. I mean, I need my yacht.
It's a tough problem.
I just don't. I just don't understand that mentality. It's amazing. The Michigan primary is actually February 27th, and there is an attempt. And you'll recall in New Hampshire, there was a write-in attempt. Biden was not running, was not on the ballot, I should say, and he went in a write-in campaign. But there was a late sort of like attempt to push a write-in campaign for ceasefire that ended up getting like 2,000 votes. I mean, it was pretty good considering how late in the stage it was. There is now an ongoing effort by some Democrats in Michigan to write in uncommitted as a way to demonstrate the frustration of Biden not demanding a ceasefire in the conflict. And I think, implicit in that is basically leveraging the aid. Well, the forthcoming aid that is still being negotiated, I guess, and I think is inevitably going to pass as a standalone bill.
Insanity.
For something like $14 billion. But also the open door policy that the U.S. government has with Israel in terms of arms that are stationed in Israel in one of our sort of, caches, as it were. And also there's been multiple now end runs around Congress to provide millions in sort of like supplemental weaponry, that type of thing. And I would imagine also it would show the concern over the defunding of UNRWA, which is the primary source of aid distribution in Gaza. We will maybe talk a little bit later about this. We'll play this clip from Channel 4 in Britain, which they got a hold of the, whatever it was, I think it was a 12-page document that was given to the UNRWA funders, that being, U.S., Britain, Australia, et cetera. And it was based on that document that they suspended their funding. And when you read what the document says, it literally I don't know, Dan Bongino could have come up with exactly the same evidence.
Yeah.
It's just an assertion.
And they took that assertion on face value and immediately acted on it on the day that the ICJ ruled that it was plausible that Israel was committing genocide. So weird.
Useful.
And but here is a clip as we talk about the sort of like what's happening in. I just lost my sound sheet here.
It's on the on our here. I can pull it up here.
I can't find it.
It's this is Abby Phillips speaking with Dearborn Mayor Abdullah Hammoud.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
as we're gearing up towards that Michigan primary, I mean, we've been sounding the alarm on this program for a few months at this point. We're 4 months into Israel's massacre in Gaza. And there are many Arab American voters who are, I heard Matt Duss describe it on Democracy Now! Yesterday as incandescent with rage. And Biden seemingly is flippant about the effects that this is going to have in Michigan, but he has very small margins there, and we need a lot of turnout to defeat Donald Trump. But this was the mayor, Abdullah Hammoud, speaking to Abby Phillip about Biden's recent trip to Michigan and how he didn't make really much of an effort at all.
And we should just also say that I think sometime in the past week, the Wall Street Journal had an op-ed that called Dearborn Jihad Central or something.
Capital, yeah.
I mean, just so
throwback.
bigoted.
Welcome to Dearborn, America's jihad capital.
Listen, in many respects, worse than it was in the wake of 9/11. As we got closer, like in the Obama era, this sort of came roaring back because I don't know what it was about Barack Hussein Obama that for some reason the huge swaths of the American public became virulently anti-Muslim because this guy's middle name was Hussein. But here's that interview.
Joining me now is Abdullah Hammoud. He's the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, which is home to one of the nation's largest Arab American communities. Mayor, thanks for joining us. President Biden is in your state courting union members, but he did not meet with Arab Americans during this trip. Was this a missed opportunity?
I absolutely think it's a missed opportunity whenever dialogue can happen, constructive dialogue that can help save lives, because that's the conversation we want to have. And calling for a ceasefire and ending the bombing and unrestricted military aid to Israel, we want to save lives. We believe no innocent man, woman, or child should be killed.
And to that end, the White House says that it's deploying senior administration officials to Michigan this month to discuss a number of issues with community leaders there, including this war. If the White House does extend an invitation to meet, will you accept it?
For anybody who wants to have a conversation about how we change course, that's the only condition, that there has to be a willingness and an openness to change course on what's unfolding now. Secretary Blinken just last week said that the Middle East is the most volatile it's been in 50 years. And that's due in part because of this administration's decision making. So if they're willing to come to the table with an open mind on how to change course, that's a conversation and dialogue that we can partake in.
So you're saying that you really only want to sit down if they say in advance that they are willing to change their strategy. Is that what your position is?
If you had a disagreement with your congressional official and you said you wanted to voice your concerns, and if they said, hey, I'll come listen to you, but I'm never going to change my mind, I think you yourself would say, hey, you know what, let's just pass in this conversation and save both our times. But if there's a willingness and an openness to say, hey, you in Dearborn, you might know a little something. We come from these Arab countries that everybody keeps talking about online. The largest portion of the city of Dearborn is largely Lebanese immigrants, Palestinian, Yemeni, Syrian, Iraqi. In each one of these countries, we have lived through the firsthand accounts of apartheid, of occupation, of oppression, of bombardment, devastation, and bombing. And so we can speak from a firsthand accounts of what's actually unfolding on the ground.
Some Michigan Arabs and Muslims have launched a campaign, and they're saying abandon Biden, and they're urging members of their community to show up to the polls but not cast their vote for Biden. These efforts are also happening in other key states. This is, as I'm sure you know, going to be a very close election likely. Do you agree with this strategy, abandon Biden?
For me, that question has to be put back to the candidate, to President Biden. It's on the candidate. It's his responsibility to earn the trust and respect of the voters. I've run for office before. I've never pointed at the voters of my district and said, you're at fault if I'm not elected. In fact, it's me as the candidate. It's President Biden as the candidate to put forward a policy platform that is receptive to all of Americans. What we're asking for, a ceasefire, is not something that only the majority of Arab Americans and Muslim Americans support. In fact, over 60% of Americans support a ceasefire, over 80% of Democrats. And so for me, I would urge President Biden to heed the calls of Americans from coast to coast.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, certainly you want the president.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing is like, this is how democracy works, buddy. You know, when it comes to presidential elections, there's this drive, and it's usually from white liberals chastising communities who may not turn out in the way that they deem sufficient because they don't feel represented, saying, well, I mean, do you want Trump? Do you want Trump? Well, when your maybe family members are, and I know this is for the primary, but going into the general, like when your family members maybe have been assassinated with money that's from your tax dollars, or when it's just a group Arab Americans that you identify with and you feel completely like your voice is not heard, withholding your vote is a way to get your voice heard, because the president has to come to you and say, I'm going to do this for you. That's how democracy works. And just like the poll numbers that he cited there, I want to add this as well. Data for Progress conducted the poll at the end of last year. 76% of Democrats support a ceasefire. He mentioned around 80%. But this more recent Economist YouGov poll that Jeet here cited in his piece around a week ago shows 49% of Democrats believe Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. That's nearly half of Democrats. 21% reject the genocide description altogether. 30% say they don't know. But that is a plurality closer to a majority of Democrats that believe they're committing genocide. And 40% of black people support the genocide description. 46% of Hispanics and 49% of voters 18 to 29 believe Israel is committing genocide. Not just a ceasefire, but the genocide description. And that is, over the course of 4 months, a massive sea change in public opinion. And the White House has refused to change course, even though half of their voters, the biggest bloc in the Democratic Party, when answering that question, 49%, accept the genocide description and believe that our government is supporting a genocide.
Let's continue on with this clip a little bit too, because he was asked that question. But the flip side of that too, I should say, is that from a political perspective, like the cost associated with calling for a ceasefire, even the cost associated with not rolling out a $14 billion aid package or leveraging that. I mean, we can see right now, this is an aid package for Israel that has been proposed by the administration for a month and a half, 45 days. It was a mid to early December when this was proposed. And if someone can find me a single voter who has said, I'm not voting for the Republicans because they're holding up this aid to Israel.
Yeah.
It's just not happening. And so the flip side of what Biden could be doing is there's no cost associated with that. Like the American public is not going to hold a U.S. president accountable for calling for a ceasefire in this conflict. It's just there's no evidence of that whatsoever. Just to cover the other side of that ledger, but continue.
President to change his position. I think one of the things that and I know you've gotten a lot of questions about this, people are wondering about realistically what is the alternative and what does that alternative mean for the Palestinian people? Does it worry you about what a Trump presidency could mean for those lives that you said earlier? You're concerned about each and every one of the innocent people who shouldn't die being saved.
Absolutely. I think Trump is a threat to American democracy. So the question should stand. What will President Biden do to prevent the unraveling of our American democracy? Why is being aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu and the most right-wing government in Israel's history worth potentially sacrificing our American democracy? I had a resident that came before a city council meeting who had lost over 80 family members in Gaza. And the question in everybody's mind is, while we send our condolences for your loved ones, we want to know how you're going to vote come November. And I think that's extremely dehumanizing to think of Palestinian lives only in the context of polls. Arab American lives and Muslim American lives outside of the context of just polls.
Well, yeah, I totally understand that. I think, but really what I'm wondering about is not about the polls, but do you believe genuinely that President Biden, I think the White House would say this, behind the scenes, that they're trying to put pressure on the Israeli government to reduce the loss of innocent lives? Do you believe that at all, or do you think that that's not happening?
I believe those are political talking points. There's never been a war in history in which 80% of the country is absolutely decimated, where 100% of the population has been displaced, and where 50% of all the deaths are children. That has never happened. For us, we want action, not lip service. If President Biden wants to take a firm stance, he could begin by restricting military aid to the state of Israel. He could begin by calling a ceasefire, because right now, nearly 200 civilians are killed each and every single day. These are tangible steps that can be taken, because what we understand is only diplomatic efforts can lead to lasting peace and justice.
All right, Mayor Abdullah Hammoud, thank you.
She seems upset about the whole thing. But
that shows the importance of attaining power. Like, we get lost in the forest of lesser evil voting and stuff like that. And, but that guy one, power, and he's able to go and say not good enough.
100%.
And that's my main concern with, not voting things is it would hurt guys like him that are on the Democratic ticket. I mean, you can find some Republicans that maybe you can send them my way, but I think like the generic, I'm not going to vote because both parties are the same. It might hurt a guy like that. That's my concern foremost with stuff like that. But that shows the importance of like actually working and getting power.
Super effective. I mean, super impressive for a guy who's just mayor of a small city. I mean, it's not, I've known some mayors of small cities, and I don't know that they're really, I mean, it can be that effective in that type of scenario, frankly. But very helpful because you got to know that was, I mean, it obviously would have reached the White House more had it been on Morning Joe. But you got to know that maybe somebody clipped it and sent it to him.
2 straight cable news presidents. It's
yes,
awesome.
actually, that's a great idea. If there's if there's a Morning Joe booker watching the show, please get the Dearborn mayor on. I am begging of you. If you have an ounce of humanity and you're a Morning Joe booker watching this show, get the Dearborn mayor on, and then maybe we can break through.
I'm quite sure there's a Morning Joe producers who watch this show. And I'm also quite sure that person will not be booked on that show. I'm
Listen
quite
to
sure
me.
of both of those things.
Yeah. We'll feature it.
That's not the
Quid
issue.
pro quo.
That's not the issue.
Okay.
They're not worried about being featured on this
they don't
thing.
care?
No, as long as it's played in the White House, honestly, that is exactly, that's all. I mean, Morning Joe has always been a middling at best ratings, but it is because it appeals to the no labels crowd and to apparently, like folks who are living in the early 90s, like Joe Biden. That's what it appeals to.
Watch the Morning Joe and then get back to work reading Matt Iglesias.
Maybe. He's got a couple of years. He's got a couple of years until he gets up there. Yeah, no, but
no, they read Iglesias.
Only because David Broder passed away.
I am going to combust.
Folks, a couple words from our sponsors before we speak with Katya Schwenk. She is an independent journalist based in Phoenix, writing for The Lever. She's done amazing work on Boeing. Maybe you've been following her from The Lever. But in the meantime, one of our sponsors, so easy for me to do this ad read. So easy. I don't even have to do anything. I can just do this because every day I am rehydrating myself with Liquid IV. It has 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, plus 8 vitamins and nutrients for everyday wellness. Liquid IV hydrates 2 times faster than water alone. And are you ready for this? All in a single stick of, you ready for this? Sugar-free.
Wow.
They still have some of the sugar ones, but they have at least 3 flavors of sugar-free that I'm aware of. Lemon, lime, peach, and I think grape. For me, I've been lemon liming it quite a bit lately. 1 stick and 16 ounces of water hydrates you better than water alone. Like I say, 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink. There's no artificial sweeteners and 0 sugar. 8 vitamins and nutrients, everyday wellness, non-GMO, free from gluten, free from dairy, free from soy. Now I get to refill my cup and not be so awkward because now it's part of like the sponsorship.
There you go.
Folks, it's great. You could take these things on the plane. You take them when you travel. You put them in your backpack. Take them to work. It doesn't matter what you do with it. For now, I don't know, 5 years, 1 to 2 bottles of this during the show. And that's how I stay hydrated. And it's great. It's great. If you've had a night out, if you're flying, you get your dried out because of the heat in your apartment, you can't turn off.
Have a little cold, need to stay hydrated.
All of it. We had a little bit of situation at my house with, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but things that dehydrate you. You can rehydrate yourself for the new year. Grab your Liquid IV Hydration Multiplier, sugar-free, in bulk nationwide at Costco, or get 20% off your first order when you go to liquidiv.com. Use the code, you ready for this? Majority Rep, not Majority Report. Majority Rep at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code Majority Rep at liquidiv.com. Also, sponsoring the program today, this episode in part brought to you by Zippix Nicotine Toothpicks. Zippix brings you a totally satisfying, convenient, great tasting way to curb your nicotine cravings. Look, it is time for you to stop putting smoke and vape oils in your lungs, or frankly, around you so that other people get it in their lungs. Believe me, I have been there. You can now get your nicotine fix anytime, anywhere, without having to rely on smoking or vaping. Zippix toothpicks give you an easier, healthier, and more discreet way to get your fix. They're available in 6 flavors. They have options in 2 milligram and 3 milligram of nicotine. Also, for me, who is now off nicotine after years of having been a smoker, I mean, it's been now, well, Milo was born, 18 years. Zippix also offers caffeine and B12 infused toothpicks if you're not a nicotine user, or if you're trying to get away from your nicotine habit. The way that I basically, or at least part of the way that I got off cigarettes, was the use of toothpicks in helping me curb my cravings for nicotine, and also to just have something to fulfill
oral fixation.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And Zippix have already helped tens of thousands of customers in leading a healthier lifestyle. And if you currently smoke or vape, they can probably help you too. You can these things you can use obviously in any type of situation where smoking or vaping is banned. I don't know, a flight or a restaurant. It's a great way after a meal. I mean, people can see me toothpicking on the show, which I know is probably inappropriate, but I still do it. Make your lungs make your lungs happy, and frankly, the people who care about your lungs happy. Try Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Ditch the cigarettes. Ditch the vape. Get some nicotine infused toothpicks at zippixtoothpicks.com today. Get 10% off your first order by using the code Majority10. The number 10, Majority 10 at checkout. Your lungs will be glad you did. You must be 21 or older to order. Warning, of course, nicotine is an addictive chemical. Zip more, smoke less with Zippix nicotine toothpicks. The link for all of our sponsors today will be in the podcast and YouTube descriptions and at majority.fm. Quick break when we come back. Katya Schwenk, journalist from Phoenix, writing for The Lever on the sort of flying grounded disaster that is Boeing. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Katya Schwenk. She's a journalist based in Phoenix, writing for The Lever, and again, gives me an opportunity to encourage everybody to go and sign up for a subscription for The Lever. They do great journalism over there. We've had folks on for The Lever and a couple of things, and Katya, your work on this Boeing stuff has been really great. You've been on this beat now for weeks, I guess, and more. And just give us a little bit of the backstory that brought us to the point where people, started to sort of like acknowledge more broadly that there is a problem with Boeing. But I guess maybe this acknowledgement may have come in the last week of the Trump administration too. But just give us that background.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the reason that Boeing, of course, has been in the headlines, mostly for the last few weeks, has been that really shocking incident on an Alaska Airlines flight, right, in which a door panel blew out shortly after takeoff, mid-flight over Portland, Oregon, leaving the escaping hole in the side of a Boeing plane. Obviously a really shocking moment. It seems basically miraculous that there were no serious injuries on that flight. And I think, in a sense, it's an isolated incident. There's an ongoing investigation trying to figure out what's caused it. But I think what we have tried to do, and what I think this incident has done, is really brought further attention to these ongoing issues at Boeing that have been ongoing for years. As you alluded to, Boeing is still sort of dealing with the fallout from, the devastating fatal crashes in 2018 and 2019. I think right now we're seeing new questions being raised about what happened there.
Now, I'm obligated to ask you this question. In your reporting, have you found DEI as a big problem for this? Is it really like I'm half joking. No, I'm 100% joking. But
there's no evidence that is at all at issue here.
Right. So in 2018, 2019, just remind us of what happened, because it does, for the most part, center around the MAX 737s for the most part. The ones that we had in 2018 or 2019 had to do with the software, had to do with the development of the plane. That was also sort of a function of changes that were happening at airports, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, Boeing at that time was rolling out the MAX, sort of new generation of the 737s. And it installed a new sort of flight control system, in my understanding, to correct sort of an engineering issue, and to bring the plane's nose down mid-flight. It was the system. Pilots were not well trained on that system. What emerged from federal investigations into Boeing's rollout of this new flight control system was that Boeing had sort of hidden the full scope of it from federal regulators, leading to pilots not being fully trained on how this sort of corrective system worked in certain instances. And there was, a faulty sensor that caused the system to activate, and which then caused two planes to nosedive, and it was not able to be stopped by the pilots, causing these, really, really devastating, tragic crashes.
And so, to be clear, there were engineering fixes. In other words, like physical I guess to put it in the context of computers, hardware fixes that could have been done in the design of the plane that would have made it far less susceptible to pilot error, and also far less susceptible to needing to take it out of the hands of pilots. They tried to patch it essentially with software, as opposed to fixing sort of like the engineering, the actual construction of the airplane. And the speculation that they did this was because to fix it with hardware is going to be more expensive than fixing it with software. And you're going to have to hire more people to construct these things and to retrofit the planes. And that cuts into shareholder value, and nobody wants that, except for the people who want safe planes. So in the wake of those two accidents, what happened in the last weeks of the Trump administration?
Sure. So, just before Biden took office, there was a lot of speculation at that time of whether, Boeing was going to face any criminal charges as a result of what happened. Again, there had been this investigation that, indicated that Boeing was more aware of these problems and had sort of hidden them to an extent from federal regulators, so that Boeing would not have to delay its rollout with, additional training for pilots, right? That's sort of the narrative that has emerged investigations after the fact. And so there's a lot of speculation at that time of whether, Boeing was going to face criminal charges for this, right? The company itself. And in the very final days of the Trump administration, literally days before Biden took office, the Department of Justice brought a single charge of fraud against Boeing as a result of what happened, as a result of, the fatal crashes. But at the same time that it charged Boeing with this, with fraud, it also entered into a deal with Boeing, which had been negotiated basically, essentially in secret, that allowed Boeing to, it's called a deferred prosecution agreement, which essentially means that after a few years, since the deal was signed, but if Boeing comes into compliance, if it pays, a criminal penalty, prosecutors would agree to drop the charges. And the distinct, I should say, from a plea deal in which, Boeing would actually have to plead guilty, there would be negotiations and more judicial oversight. In this case, from the very beginning, from the day the charge was brought against Boeing, there was sort of this agreement that Boeing would not face prosecution. But, as I've written about what happened with the Alaska Airlines flight, with some of these issues we're seeing at Boeing suppliers, they are calling this deal into question.
Well, I mean, they're calling it into question, I would imagine now, of course, because it's affecting people in America, right? Like,
who's the they that's calling it into question?
Yeah, well, that question as well. And I am curious about, like, what your reporting found about maybe some differences in how the approach was taken because of the fact that this was in Ethiopia and Indonesia.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I think because of the fact that this was, I think the fact that this occurred outside of the U.S. In these countries, was absolutely a reason why, Boeing did not face the kind of criminal charges that we might have expected from a flight in which 346 Americans died, right? And sorry, your other question, who they is calling into question, the legal teams for the victims of these families, or the families of these victims, have been pushing against this deal since the moment it was signed back in January 2021. And in the wake of what happened with this flight in January, they are calling this deal into question once again.
And what's happening on that front? Like, I mean, how does a deal like that get rescinded? Is it something that the DOJ can unilaterally do, or does this something, does it have to go to court? Does it get tested after the deal is over? I mean, what's the mechanism to question that deal and hold Boeing to account for, what really looks like corners being cut to hit certain numbers in the C-suite?
Sure. Yeah, so the deal was signed in January 2021. There was a 3-year period after that in which Boeing was supposed to come into compliance with fraud laws, institute, a program, an ethics program, sort of the general, corporate compliance stuff we see in these kinds of deals. So Boeing had 3 years to do that and also to pay this fine. And that 3 years expired on January 7th, with 2 days after the Alaska Airlines incident. And when that deal expired, it began the review period in which federal prosecutors now are meeting, and we assume, and deciding, did Boeing indeed come into compliance with the terms of this deal? That review period ends in June. It's sort of expected that they will say that Boeing came into compliance. That's what, lawyers for the families of victims of the flight crashes told me that's what they expect to happen. But it is the U.S. Department of Justice, it's the Biden administration and federal prosecutors that have sole discretion, essentially, over whether or not to drop the case against Boeing. The families, the victims, the flight crashes, their loved ones are asking for a judge to just declare the deal as null entirely because it was negotiated secretly without consulting the victims, which they say was against the law. So, that it is possible that could happen, that a judge could intervene, but barring that, the, federal prosecutors really have sole discretion.
There's no appealing. I mean, it seems like what a coincidence. I mean, I understand that, the argument would probably be something to the effect of like, oh, well, these, the door came off because of a different problem. And so therefore we had rectified that problem. It's just that we had another different problem, as opposed to taking like another step backwards and going like, hey, you've got a broader building of airplanes problem rather than a specific engineering problem here. And we've also seen that like it seems that the FAA has had to step in and go like, we're not going to allow or questioning the whole self-inspection thing because of the nature. I mean, that to me also seems like an indication. I get the idea that the plaintiffs, that being the families of people who died, could argue that this deal was entered into from the beginning was illicit because of the mechanism and the means in which the deal was constructed. But are you saying that there's absolutely no mechanism in which to appeal the review by the DOJ that they had become in compliance over the course of those 3 years?
My understanding, I'm no lawyer, so, I would want to talk to, experts about that. But, my understanding is the terms of the deal lay out pretty clearly that it is the U.S. Department of Justice that has discretion. And when I spoke with, attorneys representing these families and asked them that same question, they told me that, unlike a plea deal in which a judge could say, this is far too easy on the defendant, this is giving Boeing, an easy way out. DPAs, deferred prosecution agreements, are just not subject to that same kind of, judicial oversight. Which really raises the problem. But, the other aspect of this that I'll mention is the fact that at a key Boeing supplier, Spirit Aerosystems, there have been allegations by former employees of fraud at that supplier around sort of these manufacturing defects. And, this part of Boeing's agreement part of Boeing's end of the deal was to make sure that, not only Boeing itself, but its subcontractors were complying with, fraud laws. And so, in the wake of these allegations at Spirit, I think there is an argument to be made, that maybe Boeing was not properly doing so.
I want to talk about the relationship with Spirit and Boeing, because it's not just, these aren't just some random contractor. Spirit was actually spun off from Boeing, and is I don't know if it's completely at arm's length from Boeing in that respect, and I want to talk about that in a second. But is there just staying on that deferred prosecution agreement? Is there any indication that and I would imagine this would have to happen in the Senate as opposed to the House, because the House is too busy doing, God knows what. But is there any indication that there's any type of congressional oversight hearings that are contemplated for this? The I don't know, the subcommittee on transportation or something? Because it sounds like the only way that this review can be that the trajectory of this review can be altered would be political pressure. Prosecutors go through this all the time. I'm going to make a plea deal, or I can't make a plea deal because this is too hot of a potato. I mean, is there any indication that there's any type of congressional review in the offing?
Yeah, I can't speak to whether there's going to be, congressional review of the DPA specifically. I know that there has been, interest somewhat by the Biden administration in reviewing Boeing. Pete Buttigieg said that he was going to launch a broader investigation into Boeing. I know that's something some members of Congress have said, they want to see too. I think we're going to need to see far more pressure to alter the course of a deal like this, which was really struck with the intention of, simply dropping it after 3 years.
Tell us about the relationship between Boeing and Spirit. I mean, this is, and not to be confused with Spirit Airlines, this is a manufacturer of planes called Spirit. Tell us about that relationship.
Yeah, no, I think this relationship is so emblematic of, what has happened to Boeing over the last few decades, right? As you said, Spirit Aerosystems, this is a publicly traded company, not the same, household name level as Boeing, but, a very significant company that employs thousands of people. Spirit Aerosystems was once Boeing's Wichita division. It was once, an important part of Boeing itself. But in 2005, Boeing sold Spirit Aerosystems off to a private equity company, which then, did what private equity companies do, poured a lot of money into Spirit, in the hopes of getting, big returns. Spirit quickly sort of scaled up its operations and began, producing far more planes. And somewhere along the way has gotten to this point where now it's no longer part of Boeing. Just like many other aspects of the supply chain, Boeing has outsourced, this part of its manufacturing to other companies. Boeing has less ability to oversee Spirit. Spirit has seen very serious manufacturing issues. We've written about allegations in a federal lawsuit that say that employees at Spirit were told that, they could lose their jobs if they correctly reported the amount of manufacturing defects that they were seeing in the production process. And Spirit has been a headache for Boeing for years. We've seen these sort of a series of high profile scandals from, defects in Spirit's production. And so, I think the relationship is important and really is sort of emblematic, as I said, of what has happened to Boeing over the years.
Will you explain to, and this may be outside of your portfolio, but when a Boeing spins off a Spirit, who makes money? Like, who does that benefit in that? It's like, why does Boeing, clearly, like, the companies, like, they're relying on Spirit, they're making the planes. Like, why does a Boeing do that?
Yeah, I think in this case, we saw Boeing make quite a lot of money from this deal, which then, I think it was beneficial for Boeing at that time, wanted to, get a quick influx of cash, right, for its shareholders. And at the same time, now Spirit is a really valuable asset for the private equity company, which is the Onex Group, I believe, which then made, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, several $100 million over years from its initial investment of Spirit into the point where it, divested or lost all ownership stake in the company. It's sort of what we are typically seeing is the shareholders here are the ones really making money off these kinds of deals.
Yeah, let's just, I just wanted to be clear with this. And when we say shareholders, I would imagine some of the biggest shareholders who got paid off were the executives, the top executives at Boeing, the board of directors, and then some big shareholders there ended up making this money. And it's not like Boeing needed it because they needed capital to, invest in a different type of plane. They basically have a monopoly. Yeah. They had bought their only competitor, I guess, around that time, right? McDonnell Douglas. And so there was no competition. The U.S. government, represents what slice of their business?
I'm actually not sure. Yeah.
I think it's close to 50% or 40%. So this is not like a cash poor company. This right. was just, we can make cash, spin this off. We don't have to worry about their construction standards. So what's the next step? Like, what do we anticipate? What's the next story you're going to be writing about this, I guess? And what do you anticipate is going to happen next?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's actually today that the federal investigators are expected to release their initial report into what happened, their preliminary findings into what happened in the Alaska plane. In terms of the Boeing deal, though, which is something we're going to be watching closely, like I said, it's kind of a waiting game right now. We're waiting to see whether or not federal prosecutors meet with the families of victims of the flight crashes, whether or not the Biden administration says anything about the deal. And, in the coming months, we're going to see what happens with that case. And, we're going to learn a little bit more, I think, about, what happened with the Alaska Airlines plane.
Katya Schwenk, journalist based in Phoenix, writing for The Lever, which I can't encourage people enough to go and check out. David Sirota started this, I don't know how long ago it was, a year or two ago. And but it's been a great source of journalism like this. We will put links to at least I've got, 4 or 5 of your pieces just over the past 5 or 6 weeks on this. People can catch up and find out about this. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your work.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we got a couple more things that we want to get to before we head into the fun half of the program. And of course, I get this bad habit of I have my notes, I lay them out in front of me, and then I without even contemplating it, I put them all together like a deck of cards, and then I lose what
and shuffle them up.
Yeah,
you need a mega desk or something like that.
I do need. I used to have a whole thing I could just lay out like that, and
right.
I got it here.
All right, you got it. You got it.
Yep.
I could give you a hint about some of the topics we might be wanting
to
discuss.
Well, please do.
So we got the border Ukraine thing, and we also got the Mayorkas story.
Oh, right. Yes, that's where we wanted to go with this. Right now, as we speak, this immigration story, there is so many aspects about this that is enraging and to some extent fascinating. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen a I was going to say a bigger mess up by a Democratic administration, but I've seen it a million times. Let's just get some basic history on where we are today. The Biden administration wanted to provide funding for Ukraine's war effort. It has been clear for the past, maybe even years, 6 to 9 months, that there was no way you were going to get a negotiated settlement with Russia until after this election. There's just no way. Regardless of, obviously, Ukraine is running out of weapons and money, and it is being invaded and pounded by a much bigger power. Obviously takes its toll, but Russia is also hurting, and Putin's regime is also hurting. There's no way there's going to be a negotiated settlement, it seems to me, before the election. It would be stupid for Putin to do this when he thinks that there's a 50-50 chance, or even a 40% chance, or even a 35% chance, or a 30% chance that Trump is going to get elected.
Of course.
And so that's not going to happen. And I think the Biden administration, the funding for Ukraine at this point is not necessarily for an offensive, but rather to maintain the gains that the Ukrainians have made since the initial invasion, and put them in a position where they can negotiate after the election. So in an attempt to do that, the Biden administration then added Israel aid after October 7th to sweeten the pot because
$14 billion.
Because there is, it's 50-50 in the House. My understanding is if they put the bill on the floor of the House, it would pass. And even maybe with a majority of Republicans. And And then they couldn't get that through because McCarthy was being held hostage essentially by the right wing and of his party. And, literally like 4 or 5 people, one of whom apparently Nancy Mace has lost her entire staff in the past 3 weeks. That's not relevant. And the other one is it was mad because of his ethics investigation, really principled stances.
Right.
And then the Biden administration was like, well, we're willing to capitulate essentially on whatever you want for immigration. So in the Senate, you've got Lankford and Sinema, the worst of the worst, getting together and negotiating
with Murphy too.
With Murphy, because Murphy wants the Ukraine funding.
Yep. And for all of his tough talk about Israel's human rights violations or potential ones, he's capitulated on the Israel aid in the bill too.
I think so. I think the big one though is he wants Ukraine, and he's willing to trade the Israel aid, and he's willing to trade the immigration stuff because that's not his thing. And so they fashioned this bill. And then, I don't know, about 2 weeks ago, when they just announced, like, we think we've got a deal, Trump goes, nah. And the whole thing starts to crumble around it.
And he's explicit about why he doesn't want it. He doesn't want to give Biden a win before the election. And it's just like, oh, okay, thanks for letting us know.
And we know this is the case because not only did Mike Johnson kill the bill, but 2 weeks ago, Mitch McConnell, in a private session with Republicans, says, we got to kill this because Trump doesn't want it. And so much so that even like a guy like Tom Tillis came out and said, I recorded the whole thing. Can't believe you said this. And this is what's happening with the Republicans. Here is Jim Lankford with Jake Tapper just yesterday, amidst rumors that Lankford is, and it's now become clear, is probably going to vote against his own bill that he made. Here is Lankford on Jake Tapper yesterday.
On Twitter or X by Elon Musk, who posted, quote, the long-term goal of the so-called border security bill is enabling illegals to vote. It will do the total opposite of securing the border, unquote. Now, I know that Elon Musk is not an expert on illegal aliens.
Wait, what's going on? Can we start at the beginning of this clip?
No. The part, right.
Once you start actually deporting people, the flood stops at that point. People are going to pay $10,000 to a cartel to just get deported, and that's what would happen under this bill. We would detain and deport in a much faster process.
Obviously, your fellow Republican Mitt Romney has been pretty outspoken, saying that the reason the bill is having difficulties right now is because Donald Trump wants it as a campaign issue, so he doesn't want any attempts to solve it to be successful. And in fact, former President Trump, today is slamming your work, specifically your work on the bill. Take a listen.
Just to correct the record, I did not endorse Senator Lankford. He ran, and I didn't endorse him. This is a very bad bill for his career. I don't know how a Republican senator can actually put a thing like this forth.
So just to correct the record, Donald Trump did endorse you, but regardless of that, why do you think he's going after you?
Can we just pause it for the absolute sheer insanity that is our politics? That, like, he's literally just lying about something that is the most sort of like binary. He either did endorse Lankford or he didn't.
Yeah,
easiest to look up.
I don't even think he remembers. I don't even think he has any concept of it.
And it's not like Dan Bongino is like, Mr.
Fact
President, let me fact check you there. I mean, it's just so hilarious. But it also just shows like this party is about fealty to one guy, period, end of story. But go
even
ahead.
McConnell, let's just say this too, who went on the floor after January 6th and was railing against Trump and has been saying in private how he's a cancer to the party. Even Mitch McConnell is now whipping votes against this Lankford agreement.
Yep.
This fourth.
So just to correct the record, Donald Trump did endorse you,
He did.
But regardless of that, why do you think he's going after you and this border bill, considering this is the most, and I've been in this town for a lot longer than you have, this is the most conservative immigration compromise that I have ever seen come to this level. Previous efforts under Bush and under Obama were far more permissive, far more liberal than this. Why do you think Trump's going after you?
Yeah, I don't know, obviously, other than he has a different job than I have right now. His job right now is running for president, and so he's trying to be able to manage that, and obviously a chaotic border is helpful to him in the process on that. If Donald Trump was president right now, let me be very clear, we would not have the chaotic border that we have right now. Joe Biden is not enforcing the border, even not just like Donald Trump, not like Barack Obama. We have 6 times more people crossing the border now than we had under Barack Obama. So this president's clearly not enforcing the border. But for Donald Trump, he's focused on the campaign. I'm the lead Republican on the Homeland Security Border Management Committee, and so my focus is the national security focus. I'm going to do whatever I can to be able to secure the nation as fast as I can, regardless of election cycles. This is something Americans are looking for and have asked for a very long time. We have got to be able to secure the border. Yes, it's going to have to be bipartisan. It's the United States Senate. It always has to be bipartisan. So let's work together to be able to figure out where we can find common ground and actually solve an issue. We'll solve as much as we can, then start working on the next level.
Okay, a couple of things. When Jake Tapper says this is the most conservative immigration compromise I've seen in my history of being here, I would even argue that it's not even a compromise.
Yep.
The compromise is we'll throw in everything you want for immigration, or at least your top 2 or 3 things that you want for immigration, right? Not we're not going to fund $1 trillion worth of money to go into a secret police to go and try and find everybody in this country that you would try and deport and have a 12-year program of deportation. But we will do everything else. And we'll throw that in to get the Ukraine aid. That's what what the compromise part is. There is no compromise. This immigration bill is garbage from the perspective of anybody who believes that immigrants are helpful for this country, that immigrants are human beings, that we can actually have a policy of immigration that provides people opportunity and protects them and doesn't diminish our working standards in this country, and or that also provides for citizenship for kids who were brought here before they were, of the age to make a determination of what they were going to do with their lives, or their families, or have served in the U.S. military, on and on and on. There is no compromise in this immigration. It is a complete capitulation.
It's a militarization of the border and an expansion of an authority that was allowed for in Title 42 in the pandemic, ostensibly to keep the country safe from COVID, that would give the president, the federal government basically, the authority to trigger that whenever they so choose. And so it's like not just a militarization and a funding of the border that makes very little sense, but it also expands the authority of the president, and there is going to be a Republican president again in my lifetime, unfortunately, for sure, maybe very, very soon, who would then have that authority. And that's what Biden gave. The only thing that's saving them is, once again, like when he was obsessed with that grand bargain with the Republicans as vice president. The only thing saving them is the Republican extremism and Trump himself.
And then the other funny part about this is Lankford talking about how he's got a mission. Like, Donald Trump has his job and I've got my job. Donald Trump's job is to make sure that everything seems as chaotic as possible. But my job is to actually do something. And I'm going to do that job, except for, and now we're going to jump 24 hours ahead into the future. He's not going to vote for it.
No, I won't.
He's not going to vote for his own bill.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
In the interim, it's not bad enough that Lankford, yesterday with Jake Tapper is saying, I've got to do my job and this is what it's going to take. And he wants this win because, of course, it is a huge win for people who don't like immigrants. It's not enough that he then turns around because Donald Trump has told him, he's a bad person. But we also have one of the biggest idiots in the world in control of one of the biggest social media platforms. Here's Lankford in that same interview with Jake Tapper, having to respond to Elon Musk's, I don't know, God knows, listen, some of my best friends take a lot of drugs. But when they do, they don't sit down and listen to like a Dan Bongino interview or like, Dana Loesch on immigration or whatever it is.
Hey, you are jumping to conclusions because there's a New York Times piece from December 2022 entitled "Critics Say Musk Has Revealed Himself as a Conservative." It's not so simple.
It's not so simple. That's right. He may be, or maybe it's just Joe Rogan he's listening to. But the conspiracy theories that Elon Musk believes about immigration are stunning.
Far right.
For an immigrant.
Here's a claim being circulated on Twitter or X by Elon Musk, who posted, quote, "The long-term goal of the so-called border security bill is enabling illegals to vote. It will do the total opposite of securing the border," unquote. Now, I know that Elon Musk is
Pause
not
it
an
for 1
expert.
second. Just go back a little bit because I want you to see who he is referencing. No, go to the tweet. He is quote tweeting David Sachs, a friend of a lot of libertarian shows and right-wing shows.
Yeah.
The Inflation Reduction Act was actually $1 trillion spending bill. Not quite $1 trillion, but it was definitely a big spending bill. The border security bill is actually a mass amnesty. Just assume the bills do the opposite of what they say. This is what a moron writes on Twitter.
That's his.
Oh, I like that logic though. We should say it's a closed. Wait, never mind.
But
Continue.
that's his old
whatever.
PayPal.
But
border.
here's the point. Let's just break this down. The long-term goal of so-called border security bill is enabling illegals to vote. Now, again, this immigration bill, all it does essentially is narrow the opportunity for people to come here as asylum seekers. It narrows it in a bunch of different ways. It has automatic triggers. It provides the president more authority to narrow but not expand. It limits, it expedites the deportation of people. It narrows the claims that are available to people for here with asylum. It does none of that. But even like, I'm trying to think of like an immigration proposal that would even enable illegals to vote. Like the long-term goal of so-called border security, even in his like tiny pea brain that is addled with God knows what. The idea that you would allow a path to citizenship and it would then provide you new votes for the Democrats. First of all, it takes years and years and years. Joe Biden, this bill could say everybody who crosses the border in 2024 is on a path to citizenship, like the normal path to citizenship. And by the time they get in, they're eligible to vote. Joe Biden is going to be a distant memory on this planet. It takes that long. And the data suggests that like immigrants don't necessarily vote for one party or another party. And on top of that, the Republican Party already has its power based upon a minority of the voters.
Wow.
So like this is like in all of these aspects.
But it's that existential dread about this country eventually being a majority minority country. Also, this is just exactly what Elon Musk endorsed in the anti-Semitic post in like November that forced the ADL to like have to respond to him essentially, and then he walked it back and did the trip to Israel. It's just great replacement theory stuff.
Exactly.
He just left out the Jews are the ones that are orchestrating.
Totally. All right, continue on.
But what are his politics? I can't tell.
Do the total opposite of securing the border, unquote. Now, I know that Elon Musk is not an expert on illegal immigration or the border, but he has a huge megaphone.
He does.
Explain what he's talking about here. Is he wrong?
Well, I think he needs to go back to doing the 2 million Teslas that are currently being recalled right now to be able to focus in on that. No, it's not focused on trying to be able to get more illegals to vote. That's absurd in the process on it. It is against the law for anyone that is not a citizen of the United States to be able to vote in the United States in any federal election. That remains so. Obviously, we're not dealing with that. I've heard some people say, hey, you're not taking on illegal voting, and so I'm going to oppose this bill. By the way, neither did H.R. 2 that came out of the House that so many people have said was the perfect border security bill. It also did not deal with any issues of voting because that bill was seen as a border security bill, not a voting issue bill.
Also, there's almost no examples in the history of the country of undocumented immigrants attempting to vote because it would be the dumbest thing in the world for someone to do. I desperately am invested in who's the comptroller in Putnam County. So I'm going to go and risk deportation to vote. It's just absurd.
Yeah, this is just like Joe Rogan when he had Stavros Halkias on, and Stav's dad is a Greek immigrant. And he's like, my dad can't vote, and he's been here this entire time. And it's election denial. It's the same thing that they do with Taylor Swift. Is they are, like you say, a minority of the country and even electorate, and they need excuses, and that's what these are.
And also, just to be clear, I mean, do we have that other Elon Musk tweet? Yeah, let's put that up. This guy's just so dumb and buys into the most base. Here he goes. Here he's calling Biden's strategy very simple. Get as many illegals in the country as possible, legalize them to create a permanent majority, a one-party state. This is just the dumbest, dumb thing possible.
Or is like Nazi paranoia.
First of all, he doesn't understand the difference between a legal status and citizenry that allows you to vote. He doesn't understand that. Like, we have many people here in this country who are under the temporary protected status because their country is incredibly inhospitable for them to go back. They cannot vote. When you're here on a visa, your status is legal. You cannot vote. In fact, when you're here on an asylum claim and you step into this country, one step under both U.S. statute and international statute, and you file for asylum, you are here legally and you cannot vote. If you're on a path to citizenship, you are here legally, and it could take you anywhere from depending on the person, depending on the situation, it could take you like a decade, more in some instances, before you can vote. It's just absurd.
It's absurd. But, it really is much more in keeping with his ideology when you realize that this is a person who grew up in apartheid South Africa, who romanticizes those systems. That is part of why he was so eager to go to Israel's apartheid state and felt such fealty to it, even though he's a virulent anti-Semite. And also, this is the union buster that we know is somebody who has a deep aversion to worker solidarity that might cut into his bottom line. And at the base of all of this right-wing xenophobia, maybe not from the voter base, they just don't like Latinos and people like that, or black people coming from Haiti. But for rich guys that are pushing this kind of stuff, what they really, really like about border militancy is creating a system in which the workforce is going to be in a very precarious situation, and that they can exploit them as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, the answer is, instead of criminalizing these people like we have started to do with Title 42, started by Miller after he tried for a while and then COVID gave him the final push, say, okay, we'll do it, and Biden keeping it on. We should be processing people. We should be getting them to work. And the thing is, like, when Elon Musk poses as if he's setting up for labor, that's really you should be able to sniff that out. The capitalists like the current system. He's
suing to get the National Labor Relations Board to be found to be unconstitutional right now. Trader Joe's, incidentally, has joined him on that.
And the right wing and capitalists like the current system of extremely ruthless border enforcement, because that allows like the people who are using, undocumented labor to say, hey, if you do not clean that machine out at 3 a.m. or have your kid do it, we're going to get ICE in here and send you out of there. They like this system. It is not because they are looking out for workers' wages.
Exactly. And so that is another thing that underscores the deep failure of the Biden administration here to provide a counter narrative when you can put it within those contexts and you can make it clear that this is a very dangerous situation for migrants, both in like crossing, and then also it enables the cartels, by the way, to exploit them and get. There are reports of people in Gaza trying to cross into Rafah, and they're paying like $10,000 or all the money that they have to get through and to get to safety. That is like on steroids when it comes to the southern border with these cartels. They already do it, and this is just going to increase their like marketability of this kind of very exploitative service. So that makes it much more dangerous. But like these kinds of issues could be articulated by Democrats.
Well, I want to get to that now.
But like just the modernize the processing process. That's what the Democrats should be focusing on, and putting people in a system where they can apply. That's all that they need to provide as a counter narrative.
Wonderful says, Sam, my family emigrated from Colombia. My dad was sponsored by his company, and it took us 14 years to receive citizenship.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to just move into sort of the politics around this and how much of a failure this has been in what I think the Biden administration thinks they're doing here. But first, here is Alex Padilla, senator from California, talking with CNN's Abby Phillip about this bill. It is a garbage bill. The immigration part of this is a garbage bill. I also don't like the Israel funding as well, frankly. And within this bill, incidentally, there's also, I think my understanding is there's a rider that would prevent funding for UNRWA in this bill. So this bill, the fact that it's actually not even going to get it may pass in the Senate, maybe, but I don't think so even. It may not even be introduced in the Senate at this point, but it's not going to be brought up in the House, I think is a good thing. But it really deserves to be looked at because of how it's the Democrats or the administration wants to use it in the context of the election, but how much of a failure and missed opportunity it is too. But here is Padilla basically saying like, this is garbage.
And joining me now is Senator Alex Padilla of California. He is one of the sole 2 Democrats in the Senate who opposed this bill, at least publicly right now. He's criticized it for failing to address streamers and has called it a failed Trump-era immigration policy. Senator, thanks for joining us right now on this very busy night, I'm sure, for you. I want to know, as things are ongoing right now on Capitol Hill, what are you hearing about the prospects of this bill getting to a floor vote in the next couple of days?
Well, thanks for having me, Abby. And what I'm hearing around the Capitol is a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, frankly, on both sides of the aisle about this package that, after months and months of hearing what might be on the table, hearing rumors about what was under consideration, we finally have language to review. And as you said, I do have my concerns, and as written, it's not something that I could support, both for reasons of what's in the package, like Trump-era policies of regular border closures, lack of due process, those sorts of things, which we know just didn't work. The numbers don't lie. But also for what's not in the bill. Historically, we've bound some border enforcement proposals with some legal pathways. For example, not a single dreamer will benefit or receive relief through this measure. Not a single farm worker, other essential worker will have relief in this measure. So there's a not like about what's in it, and a lot to be concerned about what's lacking.
And just the last.
I mean, that it up pretty well as to why the immigration part of this is absolute garbage. And the Biden is going to run on the idea that he offered everything he could to the Republicans and they said no. And the absolute sort of like insanity of that being like the idea of like they're so hyped up about their position on the border that they won't even take my complete capitulation and act upon it. But for Biden's strategy to work, he has to play into the number one and really the only thing that the Republicans seem to be able to run on, which is pretend that the border is in crisis. Right? So for this to work for Biden, he has to go out and agree with the Republican premise that the border is in crisis.
Yep.
And the Republicans didn't want to fix it. As soon as you say the border is in crisis, you have activated all of the lunatics on the right who are like, the border's in crisis. Republicans are better on immigration. I mean, Donald Trump realizes they're all criminals. And that's it. It's over. You're done. There's no one who's going to stop to think as their lizard brain gets activated by the border in crisis. Well, I need to look into the details of this bill, and maybe the Democrats did totally cave to the Republicans.
Exactly. Maybe this was reasonable, but or what are they going to say? So if you say the border's in crisis and that they weren't able to come to an agreement on the bill, no one cares about the agreement. People are going to come away from that and say the border's in crisis.
The border's under crisis under Biden. We better elect Donald Trump. I mean, the easy route, and even with that, what Biden, there's one thing. First of all, there's the idea that you're going to play on the Republicans' turf about immigration is just absurd, unless you're going to actually propose something that is a fundamentally different vision of immigration that supports and undergirds your voters who are in favor of immigration.
Yeah.
But if you completely abdicate that position, you're going to lose the support of those people. Maybe most of them will say, well, Trump would be worse, but you're going to lose a certain amount of fervor and intensity and the sheer numbers. And you're going to lose them just to the other arguments because you're not even providing a counter argument. And on top of which, the other major failure is that there is something in the bill that at the very least, the American population can be sort of at least 50-50, maybe a little bit more, 60-40.
I mean, Democrats certainly support Ukraine.
Provide aid to Ukraine, who are being assaulted by Russia. And even from that perspective, regardless of, and I'm just talking as a purely a political matter, the Biden administration seems to have forgotten that the whole reason why they put this into the immigration, this wasn't an immigration bill. This was a supplemental bill.
Yeah.
For aid to Ukraine, that they threw in this thing as some type of sweetener. And now the whole story is about the sweetener, because they think this is going to get them some traction. This is full-on triangulation politics that we haven't seen since maybe partly in the Obama era, when it came to the grand bargain and providing cuts to the cost of living increases in Social Security. But this is just an abject failure of politics. Fortunately, we're sort of saved from the policy because the Republicans are insane and really want it because they have nothing else to run on.
Yes, yeah. They wanted to continue. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Emma.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to give you guys a sense really briefly about, I saw this tweet from Nick Miroff yesterday from the Washington Post, who covers DHS. Worth noting, this border bill has $7.6 billion for ICE. Roughly $6 billion of that is for deportations and detention. That is more than the agency's entire annual enforcement budget. It could fund significant crackdown, especially on single adults, not the kind of thing most Dems usually support. More than the agency's entire annual enforcement budget is what Biden is bragging about giving, or what he was going to capitulate to give to ICE, an agency that was created in the wake of 9/11 and in the war on terror, that we act as if it was is this essential constitutional provision that we can't defund and dismantle. It is really, as you say, an unimaginable failure of messaging. And, the fact that it's not going to pass is a good thing, but we're probably going to still get that standalone Israel aid, and then nothing on.
But just pop up this. I don't even know if we need to watch this interview, but just Aster just sent it to me on IM, just to I guess, edify my point as to what they think they have here, the Democrats do, and how sort of just completely blinkered this perspective is. I give you Morning Joe with, show me the page first and then go to it. Show me the page.
Biden's favorite show.
Oh, wait. Yeah, here it is. Okay. Senator Schumer to Speaker Johnson, do the right thing on the border bill. I mean, the insanity here, the absolute political malpractice that is being practiced here by the Biden White House is astonishing. Because at the end of the day, the message that's being communicated to the American public, top line, low information voter, the issue with Joe Biden for the broad American public. Think about what the issue with the broad American public ultimately boils down to. Is it his age? Is it that his stewardship of the economy? Even though the economy is starting to improve, he saw those and let me rephrase that. The people's perception of the economy is starting to improve. Saw that in the polling over the weekend. People's perception of the economy is starting to improve. People's perception of Biden's age is an issue. People's perception of Biden when it comes even to Gaza and whatnot. There is one thing that brings all these together. It's not that people have I hate people who are 80 years old. The concern is a failure of leadership on all of these. They do not believe, they do not think that Biden is the leader that they thought he would be when he replaced Trump. That's the perception, the vague sort of second order perception that is behind all of these things. And when you go out and basically say, we tried to make a deal, but I couldn't get him to do it. All you're saying is that there's a crisis on the border and I can't make the people who could do something about it do it. All you're basically expressing is, I have a leadership problem.
Same thing with Netanyahu. Yep. So he thinks it just occurred to me. He's deploying the same exact freaking strategy with Israel. He's behind the scenes, working with the Israeli government through Blinken, and then a leak a day to Axios, to Politico, to the New York Times. We're trying so hard, but they're not listening.
All the meta narrative is
weakness,
not good leadership.
Yep.
And that is,
and he's feeble, and it doesn't help that he can't go out there and use the bully pulpit in any way. But that reinforces the physical, when the Republicans talk about Obama being weak. Whether he's feeble or not
is only a function because he's showing weak leadership.
I know, but when Obama was called weak, it didn't hit in the same way. Obama did show weak leadership in many instances, including in that grand bargain moment, right? But because he was able to use the bully pulpit and he had that charisma, it didn't hit in the same way when this guy isn't really coming out and talking to the American public, looks old, talks old, and every narrative that's coming out when it comes to Israel, when it comes to immigration is, I agree with everything, but they won't do what I want.
And let's also be clear, aside from immigration as an issue, when you say Donald Trump is a dictator and he is anti-democratic, you're also saying too strong of a leader.
Yeah.
And you need to be able, it's just playing too much into a narrative. Come out and say, we are going to protect Ukraine. And this is, again, putting aside the merits of the policy that people may have. But if you're running for president, you got to come out and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do it. And we have to do it. And if I have to fight Congress day in, day out to get this, but do you want the immigration bill or not? We don't know. Biden just sort of like did it quietly. Like, I'm signaling that I'm okay with you doing whatever you want on the immigration thing to get the thing. It all just looks weak. It looks just weak. And people don't have the trust in that leadership. That is the sort of like political failure here. But
it's incredible that we're back here. It really is. It really is incredible that we're back here. Because I mean, this is the exact same kind of thing we were dealing with Obama, right? Like, you know, there's not necessarily anything that we can do. And we were told by some people that Trump would be so radicalizing that the Democrats would, when they gain power, have no choice but to actually be progressive and aggressive, and we're back in the exact same situation.
I mean, that's the problem with Democrats in the sort of neoliberal era is that we can't do anything. Yeah, I mean, I'm just restating what you said.
I don't even know. I mean, like, none of this seems to me to be even the only thing that I can tell from a Biden perspective that's ideological is the Israel stuff. I mean, everything else just seems to be like it's just this era of Democrats. When there is any type of like pushback, they immediately fall into this concept of triangulation.
Mm-hmm. There's no offense.
Which is I'm going to take their issue and champion it, and they won't have an issue to run on. That's what the strategy is, the broad stroke political. He comes from an era of triangulation. So when there's this is why he did not get Build Back Better. Because again, it was the idea of like, I'm going to invite the Republicans in and show how they can't come up with anything. So we're just going to have to do it. No, that's not the way you do it. You just do it.
What about abortion? We're in this situation with abortion too because of that 90s Democrat strategy too, which was don't say the word abortion, don't talk about it. The right got that entire, got control of the argument. And I know it's like a minoritarian thing and abortion rights are popular, but they basically controlled the narrative around abortion for quite a while and were able to make gains in that way. Democrats didn't really aggressively oppose it.
What it really did is it made it impossible for Democrats to aggressively run on the implications of a judiciary because they had not taken that position in those words. They had ceded the ground, and then it was impossible for them to say, hey, remember how for the past 10 years we've been a little bit quiet on like abortion rights because we're like flashing around? Well, guess what? Now it's going to be in threat.
Well, and this is what I was trying to say. Like, I always look politics. There's the maintainers, which are the Democrats. There's suppressors, which are Republicans. Like, only way things ever move forward in a positive way is when there's people that actually like want to take the offense and cultivate things. And whether it's abortion rights, which is like, let's guarantee you right to that healthcare, and by the way, not just like that one procedure, but a holistic view of health, or immigration. We want more people here and more labor protections. You need to actually affirmatively say what you want and where you want to go. You can't just sit there and hope to like maintain it and hope the judges protect you and hope that like people will come to their senses because, oh, look at you, prove them wrong. Because I mean, this thing about, oh, we're going to grant your premise and then you are going to like leave us at the altar. All that shows the American people is that you wasted government time with a ploy.
He's a moral.
Well, it just makes you look like someone
you're
jilted. Yeah, it makes you look impotent.
He's a moral arc of progress Democrat, right? Where he basically acts as if
it's automatic.
Society is moving along a stream, and the tide will take us there eventually. And it really is just a way to work backwards from an abdication of responsibility.
Well, it's the same thing with Israel. Like, can we just do the maintain thing of the maintain a two-state fiction that is not real, or should we actually be affirmatively saying no? We want a one democratic state for safely for everybody there.
Well,
I think we have to stop
saying that.
No, I know more Democrat. I mean, I think even the left maybe even made a little mistake doing the abolish ICE simply thing, because that is a purely negative thing. There's no demand there for what the future should be. And actually, if we would have just did abolish ICE isn't up to this moment right now. We need to actually have elaborate a process that gets people in because we have space for them and protects labor. And we need to affirmatively say that. And I think like maybe there's a little bit to be said about defund the police too. I agree with those things fundamentally, but they're just purely negative. We need to be moving the ball forward.
All right, let's just play a little bit of this interview, and then we'll go into the fun half. We're not in the fun half now, right?
No.
Okay, let's just play this interview, and then we'll go. I just got too riled up.
Democratic Senator from New York, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. It's really good to have you on the show, Senator.
Great to be here.
You have
Happy
said
Monday.
that. Happy Monday. We love Mondays. You've said that you worked very closely with Leader McConnell on this bill. Now that we see what's in it, seems to be as bipartisan as it gets. Why wouldn't both sides really want this to go through?
Well, it's a great question, Mika. Look, it took a long time, 4 months of arduous negotiations. They fell off the tracks a whole bunch of times. I had to be on the phone even at midnight saying, we've got to keep going. Why?
It's very late for me.
We're at a turning point in America. This bill is crucial, and history will look back on it and say, did America fail itself? Why is it crucial? Well, if we don't aid Ukraine, Putin will be all over Ukraine, and we could be fighting in Eastern Europe in a NATO ally in a few years. Americans won't like that. If we don't help Israel defend itself against Hamas, that perpetual war will go on and on and on. If we don't help humanitarian aid to the starving Palestinians in Gaza, hundreds of thousands could starve. And the border, everyone has said it's chaos. You just saw Speaker Johnson. He said it's chaos. We have to do something legislative a few months ago. But what has happened, in answer to your question, so this is crucial for America. It's a turning point.
Okay.
History is going to look over our shoulders.
All of this just shows how their failure of messaging. He starts with Ukraine. He then goes to Israel. He then goes to humanitarian aid. And then he mentions, they say the border's in crisis. So I'm going to accept the premise the border's in crisis, which is a 100% loser for Democrats across the country to accept that premise. And on the show that apparently Joe Biden listens to
and calls the host
the
personally.
only graphic they are putting up is the border stuff. Like this absolutely shows the abject failure of Democratic messaging on this. This is a failure by the White House. Chuck Schumer just like he can't run fast enough to hold somebody's coat. So I don't know how much he's involved in this. But the idea that nobody's saying to the White House, like, hey, this is a huge mistake. You are ceding. Like, it's like, do they not remember the one thing that everybody quotes from Donald Trump's speech when he entered this race, when he came down that the escalator? The one thing he said, it was about immigration. That is what Donald Trump, his sine qua non of everything, was always based upon that. And they are now have gotten to the point where they're saying, we've got a crisis at the border. Well, 3 years into your administration, if you've got a crisis anywhere, guess whose fault it is? I mean, this is such a failure.
I mean,
let it play for 20 more seconds, and then we got to take a break so I can.
I know.
I
understand.
Bang my head against the.
Also,
the
just got a note too. The immediate touting of it being bipartisan, because it doesn't really matter what the substance is. It's just about the fact that
that's the thing. They're still living in such a bubble of like, who are they trying? Like they're trying to. They have got it in their heads that they've got to like convince George Conway to vote for Joe Biden or whomever it is. It's just absurd.
Yep.
It's just absurd. You're telling those same people that there's a crisis. An immigration crisis, and they're living somewhere in, I don't know, in the suburbs in Bucks County. And they're like, wait, there's an immigration crisis?
The president's responsible for that.
Well, I remember the one thing about Donald Trump is he was going to stop immigrants. He was going to build a wall. Go ahead.
And say, did we rise to the occasion? To his credit, Mitch McConnell did. But too many Republicans, including Speaker Johnson, are just scared to death of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has said he wants chaos. Donald Trump has said, well, wait till I become president. That'll take at least a year. Ukraine could be gone. The border will get much worse. War in the Middle East will get worse, maybe bringing us into it. He's doing it all for political
Okay, now pause it.
reasons.
Like, did you listen to what Chuck Schumer just said? He just said, let me take care of it when I become president. And Chuck's like, that's going to take a year. Now, that is a great tool if you think there's a slight chance in hell that your bill that you're promoting is going to get passed. But it's not. Everybody knew this. Everybody knew this last week. Everybody knew it 2 weeks ago. So now the border's going to get worse, according to Chuck Schumer, over the course of the next year. Who do you blame? Like, if you're an average voter, like, who do you blame? Well, the Republicans didn't pass that, but Donald Trump did say he would fix it when he got in, and Joe Biden's not been able to fix it.
Yeah, if the Republicans are the obstacle, well, they'll listen to Trump.
They'll listen to Trump, and now it's a year, and I mean, like, this is just so moronic. It's just, it's astonishing. It's astonishing. Like, did every single staffer for all these people just quit en masse? Is there no one who says, like, hey, you should listen back to what you're saying?
I mean, this is Washington brain personified, right?
So crazy. Go ahead.
Yeah. More.
And let me just say, will senators, the crucial question, the $64,000 question, the majority of Republican senators know this bill is the right thing to do. It's a compromise. Right. I don't like everything in it. But it's a compromise. That's the only.
The answer is no. You idiot.
Gotta.
Like, who is this for?
It's the tone he says it is like the same tone he takes when he's recording a robocall.
But I mean, honestly, like, who is he saying this for?
But maybe that.
It's just going to go back, and Joe Biden's going to look at it, and
donor
it's just
voice.
absurd.
Yeah, dumb donors. That's all you really need.
This is him. He's going to give an identical speech to some fundraiser.
It's so.
Yeah.
There needs to be a reporter that looks into some ideological real shifts in the White House after Ron Klain's departure and Jeff Zients coming in. I want a deeper dive into that because, like, I'm not saying this. I know this is Biden's ideology to a degree, but there has been, I think, a shift. And just throwing that out there.
Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. Blah, blah, blah. Go get some justcoffee.coop. It's so depressing. It's just so depressing to be like stuck with
people with posts and try to, help them.
Help them.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I needed that. I needed that bad.
A little bit of fortifying.
Yeah. Just talk about ESPN. Let's go.
ESPN. Talked a little bit about the NBA trade deadline. We spoke about the Super Bowl matchup, how I don't understand the Chiefs haters, and some of the coaching carousel
Okay,
nonsense.
Miss Fauci.
I know. Or Mrs. Pfizer over here. I think I'm rooting for the Chiefs. I just can't. I love Mahomes.
Something in your blood just
I love
makes you
Mahomes
wanna
because I'm a part of the deep
root
state.
for wokeness.
Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning? I don't know.
Tim Heidecker is going to be on the show tomorrow.
Oh, great.
Oh, nice. Not
half.
ESPN or
No.
this show. On Left Reckoning tonight, Aaron Brown talking about a little guy that moved to Austin, Texas, and now thinks he's a Texan by the name of Joe Rogan. Talking about Joe Rogan tonight with Aaron Brown on Left Reckoning, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get the post game.
All right, folks. Tim Heidecker on tomorrow on the fun half, and see you in the fun half right now.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males.
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black